So I guess I'll start with your wife, Champion Liz, was telling me a little bit about the backstory for this film and just in terms of the experience that you brought to it and the changes that you made in your life to make this happen. And would you can tell it better than I can.
Sure. So I started filmmaking about 30 years ago, screenwriting first and then filmmaking, and made shorts, commercials, music videos, and had some success, and that success led to teaching. And my wife and I opened up a film school almost 20 years ago, and that was amazing, and truly like life-changing. One of the best things I've ever done was sharing my passion for film with students, but it also put my own filmmaking on the side. And about 5 years ago, I got the idea for this script. It was actually the 13th feature-length screenplay that I wrote, but I had never filmed any of the features. And when I got this idea, it just sort of naturally occurred in one house with 7 actors. Like I wasn't trying to jam it into that story, it just felt like that's the way the story should be told. And I was kind of like, well, if I don't make this film, I'm never gonna make a feature-length film, because how can we not make 7 actors in one location? But that meant making some life changes, and so I sort of retired from teaching, and I to focus on making this film, and we had to crowdfund, and I'm really proud because 90% of the budget of the donations came from my students. And so these are students who are like off working in Hollywood and in TV, and they're like, they wanted to see their teacher make something. And so that was really rewarding, but also kind of daunting, because you don't want to let your students down. And I've been teaching them for these years, and I was like, if I make a bad movie, they're going to be like, who the hell taught us? So it was definitely life-changing. Making this feature was, I made my first film when I was 15 years old, and so making a feature was a lifelong dream that took me a long time to get there. So if anyone here is still like dreaming it and haven't done that yet, like it's not too late. And so that's the journey that I went on.
Great, that's amazing. So I have to say that I'm so happy that both of you are here, but I was talking to you a little bit, Chris, and I was saying that one of the things that's so cool about this film is that it has a very unique tone, and the tone strikes a really interesting balance between tension and drama and comedy. And Frank's character is essential to that. And so could you talk a little bit about kind of what you were thinking about as you were working out that part?
Sure, yeah. So it does have all those tones, and I really did want to mix them, because those are the movies that I love, and you try to make a movie that you want to see. Frank does provide a lot of the humor, and it was really interesting casting Frank, because we had over 4,000 actors submit for these 7 parts, and I did all the casting myself because I have a background in casting and I just love it. And in particular for Frank, a lot of actors would play the part as just a big heavy, it's just a big like, I'm threatening and dangerous. And Bates was amazing because he got all the nuances of Frank and the layers, and there's also, he doesn't talk much for like the first 10 minutes, but he's always doing something. Like when you watch the film a second time, like he's always doing something. And what he's doing is so interesting and clever and fun. And that's the best experience you can have as a writer-director, is when actors bring your parts to life and make them even better than you imagined. I don't know if you want to add something to that.
Well, I just, in that last callback that we went to, I think there were 4 Franks and 3 or 4 of each of the characters. And I almost walked out, because this guy that was like 7'6" walked in the room after we were all kind of hanging out there, thinking, crap. He'd get it just by looks. I was able to read with Carmen, who played Maria. I was able to read with her, which we immediately, like when we left the room, I was like, let's do something else together. It just doesn't work out. So great opportunities, and we had a blast doing it. So.
Actually, I was going to say, Nili, do you want to hold on to the mic and talk about your approach to your character?
Sure. I mean, Chris wrote it so well that I read it and I knew her. I felt like I knew her. We have to do self-tapes, or the auditions now we're recording isolated at home, and I think a lot of actors, myself included, you can start doing so many takes and take after take after take, and then you have to decide which one to submit, and you like this from this and this from that, and I did one take of the scene. My husband was my reader, and I was like, I think that was it. Literally never before and never since has that happened, but I just got her. And obviously, you know, it grew and developed, and especially with these guys. I mean, I told them when we were wrapping shooting, I didn't have to act at all I had to do was listen to them and respond with his words. It felt like it was like a great script with amazing actors that gave you so much. I mean,
We looked like a bunch of kids in a sandbox, you know, with a pail and a shovel, and we're like, We just had such, when we were on the set, we didn't need warm-ups, we just kind of found each other, looked at each other and said, go, you know, and then with Chris's guidance, we made some fun stuff work, but it was chemically speaking, the chemistry with the cast was just unbelievable.
that callback that Bates was talking
Yeah.
about, I remember reading with him and Carmen too, and I was
Yeah.
like, he's funny. And then we got to first day, just the read-through, we weren't even shooting or anything.
Summer
And
glasses.
the scene where she comes to them at the door, and we were just sitting around a table, there was no set, there were no lights, there was no nothing, and I just looked up at him and I was like, oh God. He was so terrifying, and I was like, oh, this funny guy is terrifying.
I was just going to add, we had 2 days of rehearsal, and we rented that house for the month, and the adult actors all lived in that house for the month. So, you know, we'd start shooting at noon, we'd typically stop by midnight most nights, and then they would just hang out, and we'd be having a drink before they went to bed, and they'd wake up in the morning and have breakfast together, so there was just a great camaraderie that
Tell them
helps.
adults.
The
house was haunted.
The house was haunted.
Okay, so I'm just gonna go back to what you had said about this is the kind of movie that you love, and if you could maybe share like the kind of films that provided inspiration and where the kernel of the idea came from.
Sure. So I'm a cinephile. I mean, I've watched over 10,000 movies, and there's so many. For the look, Teo Maniaki, our cinematographer, and I were really influenced by like early Spielberg. So we were looking at shots from like Close Encounters and E.T., just for like the warmth and the look of the house and the nighttime shots. We even chose like anamorphic lenses because we wanted that wide, even though like you typically associate wide lenses with bigger stories. We wanted to shoot wide, even though we were sort of trapped in a house. I'm inspired by old Twilight Zone episodes. The whole phosphacy thing, I was inspired by an episode of Taxi. There's an episode where, you know, there's a prediction of fortune that they think is going to come true and someone's going to die, and I just always remembered and loved that episode. I mean, it comes from everywhere. For me, I keep a writer's journal, and I just put any idea I get, I throw in there, and literally like 10 years ago, I threw in that journal. Guy comes home from work, tells his wife, I don't do for a living what you think I do for a living, we need to leave now, you're in danger, would she go? And that was like just the tiniest little seed of an idea, and then, you know, 5 years later, it starts to germinate into something bigger.
That's great. Well, I have more questions, but I want to open it up to the audience to see if anybody has any questions for Chris or Nili or
Bates.
Bates.
Yeah.
It's like
That's a
the
weird
motel.
name.
I will remember that.
I'll make it through.
Do you have any questions? Yes. Gabriel.
I'd like to know how much shooting days did it take to?
Yeah, so we had 20 days in total. The first 2 days were rehearsal with a tiny bit of night shooting. 20 days in total. The first 2 days, there was like rehearsal during the day, and late at night there was a tiny bit of night shooting, and then 18 days of shooting. So we were doing about 5 pages a day. Most of it was pretty smooth as far as days. The trickiest part was the teenagers, because I really like teens as teens. I hate when 24-year-olds are playing 15-year-olds. So Carson, who plays Taylor, I was 14 when we shot this, and Ethan, who plays Cole, was 16, and he had just turned 16. They had both, this was the first time they'd ever kissed anyone in their lives. So that was, you know, it's exciting. You have an intimacy coordinator on set. They can only work, it's a SAG shoot, they can only work 5 hours at a time. So that made some of the days a little trickier because you run out of time with them. So sometimes these guys would be acting opposite tennis balls. because Carson like had to go to the tutor and she couldn't be there for the full shot. So that's, you know, you're trying to emote, like, you know, apologizing like, I've ruined your life, and she's not there, it's a tennis ball.
Any other questions? Yes?
Yeah, I might have missed if you said it, but did you say you offer any type of screenwriting course or something to the public that anybody can come out?
So yeah, I've taught screenwriting for 25 years. The school, I literally retired so that I could do this. I actually am hoping to, I expect to be teaching again in the fall, but not through the school that I taught at, which was NJ Film School. I still, screenwriting is my first love. It's how I got into filmmaking in the first place. Everything to me, filmmaking-wise, is storytelling. That's why that award really means a lot to me. And yeah, I love teaching screenwriting. If anyone here is interested in screenwriting, not looking at me, just do it. Screenwriting is fantastic. It's such a good journey.
Yes.
So with the trying to get the balance between the sci-fi aspect and the human drama and the family, were you tempted, or was it difficult? Did you struggle with how much of the sci-fi to bring in? Because you can imagine a lot of other scenarios where sci-fi could take over the movie or, you know.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, so the question is about how much sci-fi to put in it. I mean, so to me, there's like two sort of kinds of sci-fi, if I'm generalizing, right? Like there's like real sci-fi, like The Martian, where it's like, what could really happen if you got stuck on Mars? And awesome, love it. And then there's like gobbledygook sci-fi, which is what I did, which I also love. But so with the gobbledygook sci-fi, sometimes I think like less is more, because if you start talking about it too much, then it just starts to fall apart. So I was always hoping, like the film is done 7 parts, I was just hoping people could survive part 2, if they could survive the part where Edgar's telling about why, you know, what his message is and what he can do. If they could survive that, then they would enjoy the rest of the ride. So I tried to keep it as tight as I could, because at the heart of it, to me, this was a story about 2 families. It's this family that was still loved each other but had grown apart, and through this incident would grow back together. And this sort of criminal family that was also, I mean, I think of the character of Frank and Maria as like this sort of brother and sister who love and hate each other at the same time, and they're saddled with the kid. And, so I really just wanted to tell the story of those 2 families on this one night. And the sci-fi-ness of it is cool, but would be secondary to it all.
Yes.
Hi, can you talk a little bit about how you wrote the story, because it goes backwards, you know, so
Yeah, she's asking about how I wrote the story because of the parts and it's non-linear.
And continuity.
Yeah, it was always written that way. It was from the first draft. It started and then jumped backwards. And I love nonlinear storytelling. I think it's really interesting. I think if you told this story linearly, it just wouldn't be as interesting. But I thought it also, like one of my favorite movies, Memento, I thought that by telling it non-linearly, in a certain way, you'd be in Edgar's head where he's seeing images out of order. He's seeing moments in time that haven't occurred yet. And so you're seeing moments that don't necessarily fit together, but hopefully at the end it all gelled together and tried to do a lot of overlap so that you would always know where you were. Continuity-wise, I mean, I spent a lot of time working on it with the script to make sure that it made sense, but also we had an amazing crew. I mean, on some days there were 40 people there, and there were just so many eyes on set, making sure, like we'd finish a take and people would run in and adjust costumes and blood amount and capers and everything would go back to where it was. Yeah. So that when you go from scene to scene, you wouldn't hopefully notice any continuity mistakes.
So do you use a storyboard to do that, or is it just retelling?
What was the first part?
Do you use a storyboard to do that, or is it just like?
So did we storyboard? There was a little bit of storyboarding at the very beginning. Teo, the cinematographer, and I shot listed the entire film. We had, I think, over 600 shots. We did, you don't necessarily do all of those shots exactly, like things change when you get on set, but you can't, I don't think you could film all of that in the time frame that we had if we hadn't like planned it out. We're shooting a scene in the living room with 6 people, and the coverage on that is crazy because you got to get everyone's reactions, and people are moving, so eye lines are constantly changing. So we had that planned all out, and we literally hung it up on a board so we could like check it off. Like, oh, we got that coverage, okay. So if we end up in the editing room, we'd be fine because we knew we didn't have the money to come back and reshoot if there was a mistake. So it was very planned.
Wow.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Yes.
You have the same watch as the character?
I have the character's watch. So in the script, when it came time to say that Edgar checks his watch, you're trying to include details. The devil's in the details, the character's in the details, and so I just wrote he checks his Lego wristwatch because I thought he would have a Lego wristwatch. And but I didn't have one at the time, and so I was like, all right, we're gonna make the film. I have to find the right Lego wristwatch. I go on eBay looking for Lego wristwatches, and I'm just scrolling through old Lego wristwatches, and suddenly this watch comes up, and I know you can barely see it, but this Lego wristwatch, every Lego wristwatch out there has pictures of Legos on them. This one has a constellation in the center. There's no Lego character. It's just, I literally got like goosebumps when this watch came up, and I was like, I'll pay anything for it. It didn't work. I had to bring it to the jeweler, and I was like, I'm bringing you a Lego wristwatch. Can you fix this? And they were happy to do it. It's not a prop that I let the actor keep. I was like, that's my watch.
Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you so much for sharing your film. Thank you.